Busy creating a farm team for future supernatural recurring characters, it's V'ger Please, A Hateful Voyage to the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
And I'm your loving father, who will go on to become the King of Hell, Peter.
Before we actually start talking about the episode, I think we have something to apologize for on this show, Peter, to our international audience, which is actually most of our audience. Last week, we titled our episode Harry's Canadian Girlfriend after you dropped the perfect joke regarding a description of Ensign Ballard and what she kind of felt like in the episode, except we didn't know that joke does not translate like at all. We had our Australian listeners who were like, what the fuck does Canadian girlfriend mean? Like, do you guys not like women from Canada? What's the problem?
Are you guys being racist? What is this?
Can you be racist to Canadians? I don't know. Let's find out.
So yeah, Canadian girlfriend, for those of you not in the trauma support group, means a girlfriend who doesn't exist. Oh yeah, I'm dating a girl, but you wouldn't know her because she lives in Canada. And the world before the internet, there was no way to verify. There was no Facebook or Instagram. So what 13-year-olds said was the truth as far as anyone could be sure. And that usually meant it was a lie. I have my own redaction I have to issue here. I made a statement during that podcast as well that I got called out on. And that was, I wasn't aware that I was into purple-headed bald chicks. Nathan has reminded me that there are purple Asari, and Asari don't actually have hair from Mass Effect. And
yeah.
I'm sure it's fucking Asari, so...
Yeah, you can't... I mean, I'm somewhat colorblind, so they were always blue-skinned aliens to me. But yeah, I think we have to hard agree there.
Yeah.
So what did we watch this week, Peter?
Well, I got one last piece of it. It's been a while since we've like really jerked people around in the beginning and talked about other stuff.
That's true.
I saw a post. Who was it? With the Eagle Moss thing.
Oh yeah, someone was putting together the D, right? Someone was putting together a D model in the trauma support group.
Devin. So he's posting pictures. He's got a couple in the cells, and he's got the bridge module put together on this thing. I don't know. Eagle Moss, everything I knew about Eagle Moss was just little one-off, super big micro machines. But this is like a kit that you put together with lights and wire, and it's all die-cast metal, and it's huge with like, 15-inch nacelles, 10.5-inch nacelles. This thing's going to be huge. It's going to weigh a ton. It looks cool as fuck, and reminds me that I went up to my parents' house last weekend with my new van, and I filled it up with all my crap that's been up rotting in the attic. And I came back with like all my old stuff and like my Playmates Star Trek spaceships. So I got the Derridex and
you got
Enterprise.
The whole collection. Yeah.
Dude, you want to talk about some nostalgia? It got me good.
I saw you were trolling on eBay for how much it must have been worth because you were posting about the runabouts.
I got some other juicy stuff. Silverhawks stuff. Crazy money. Like some of it's I'm not attached to whatever, and some of it might have even been bought with the intention of selling later. Like the Trek stuff I'm not going to give up because that's important.
Right, of course.
Also, you can buy most of that for like $35, so it's not...
It's not as collectible, sure.
It's not $1,000 Lego set. You're like, oh, goodbye. But yeah, it's cool seeing all that stuff because that was like my favorite, and having that back around. I'm gonna have to hang it from the ceiling before my kids trash it. But that's what's new and exciting in my life. I found my old toys. Like
anything that I had that was collectible, aside from literally Magic the Gathering cards, that was the only thing I was able to hang on to that had any either sentimental or financial value from the past.
What happened? Your parents just throw it out?
No, it got by a garage sale while I was in college. My mother, God bless her, right? Like, love her to death, but she actually sold off all of my retro video games.
Speaking of childhood tragedies, Season 6, Episode 18, Child's Play.
This was refreshingly not ass, I guess, so I would just initially describe it. Like, this is a pretty good episode. There are problems. We'll get into them. It also has a clear repeat of a major plot beat that you can't get away from.
I'm excited to see what your criticisms are, because I was blown away by the quality of the story and plot development in this.
I think there's a failure only in sequencing of where the episode is in the run. I think it's just a little too close to when the kids came on board. I think this just needed a little bit more space before they sprung it on everybody. And second, the fact that it's the second episode of Star Trek Voyager where there's a successful use of a bioweapon against the Borg that Voyager questionably decides to prevent being used. Which,
it might be the second bioweapon, but it's probably the 18th or 19th time that something could have wiped the Borg out completely, and Janeway puts the kibosh on it. Like, I'm beyond even caring about Janeway's misplaced mercy towards the Borg at this point. I just, season 6 has been so fucking rough that this really stands out, I think, at this point, as my front runner for the best episode of the season, and one of the strongest entries I think I've seen out of the entire series. I understand what you're saying, that they play the attachment to the crew card a little early for characters that have just been integrated and really only have one episode under their belt as far as like being a part of the crew. I'm going to counter that by saying you look at something like Barge of the Damned, which was the B'Elanna Goes to Hell episode with terrible Doom CG, right?
of course, yes.
Which was so late in the series that I felt like it was really misplaced there. So I think I'd rather have significant growth front loaded than try to play it after it's, it misses its right point.
Sure, you'd rather have it a little too early rather than let it ripen on the vine and go bad. I get it. As I said, refreshingly not ass. I think this is a good episode. I think it is elevated by Jeri Ryan specifically. Turns out she's really fucking good. And when she gets an opportunity to actually invest herself as an actress in her character development, and they give her a chance to sort of get into it and let the little details come through in her performance, it's great. And this is, I think, a prime example of that.
So we open up in this patronizing Buster Science Fair.
Dollar store level Captain Picard Day shit. Like this is Captain Picard Day, except not nearly as cool.
This is Janeway lost a bet, and now she has to go judge a science fair for 6 kids. You've got the Borg transplants, and then you've got Naomi Wildman, who I was happy to forget had existed, but there she is with her, I don't know, CGI globe.
I did like that Naomi just starts hanging out with these kids. Like she's just like, yay, other children. I'm gonna have my scenes with them now. Like that is actually kind of nice.
Let me tell you what I want. Let me tell you about the missed beat here. All right. Not that Voyager cares about its own character development points, but last I checked, and it was, what was it? Survival Instinct was at the Borg Quartet.
Yeah, from season 5.
We saw some very overt race. Well, I don't know.
No, that was from this season. God damn. Go on.
God, was that?
Yeah, that was second episode of this season. It feels like an eternity ago.
You had some real overt. No, yeah. So 7 and 9 would have put the flame out in that Borg racist routine we saw at her. She was very scared with some very strong preconceived notions about those Borg. But yeah, with as buddy as she is with 7, she should have no problem snuggling up with these Borg kids. So you've got the science fair. I think it's shitty it's only available to the kids. I would have liked to see Neelix with his own direct entry, some sort of a sentient cheese that he had fermented.
Oh, I mean, the dude has inspired how many incredible engineering feats by giving people coffee in the mess hall. Mm-hmm. He helped invent transwarp drive, for Pete's sake.
He did. Who else could we have put in here that would have been a strong...
Harry Kim, but he would have gotten clowned.
I want to see the Equinox people in there with a new use for space kitties.
then the Equinox people want to enter, and then Janeway's like, "No, you've done enough. You've had enough science. You're banned from science.
Banned for life." And they're
No
like,
hell.
"Listen,
We need no hell tech on this ship."
Instead of crushing up these space kitties for warp juice, we've made a viable Viagra alternative that
it's Elder Vampire and the blonde engineer lady.
Yeah.
And, they really actually just had a bun cake recipe. Like they're really trying to reform, but we're not allowed.
It's Tuvok trying to get in there with Lon's genetically engineered plants that were going to increase oxygen production, and he's trying to like sneak it off as his own work.
The twins cloned potatoes. Nazadi had essentially an ant colony.
That is a Borg cube.
Right, that is a cube with luminescent drones and a queen, to which Janeway's like, I sense there is a motif that you are having trouble letting go of.
Mm-hmm.
And they arrive over at Icheb, who has created a gravimetric sensor array to be able to detect wormholes, which Janeway's like, well, actually, this is useful. That's cool. Good job, bud.
For your reward, you get a new wardrobe of hip-hop camo outfits.
He does look like he is about to drop the hottest track LA saw in 1996,
And I mean, it's shitty Voyager civilian future clothes, but at the same time, it's not the worst I've seen. So I'm like, okay, maybe
if it's not as audacious as a discount African king get up, really, how bad is it?
Dick graphics built into it. And I've just been reminded of the terrible Maquis.
Oh yeah, the Rainforest Cafe uniforms they had.
Been some real bad
smoldering stuff. Catcher guy with his chest protector.
Mm-hmm. So she's impressed with what Icheb's done, and the episode starts really kind of honing in at that point of, hey, this kid's got potential. Janeway pulls Seven off, and Seven's like, he wants to put in shifts in astrometrics, and Janeway's like, well, that's too bad. It's not going to happen because we've somehow found his family, and he's going home.
So the episode really focuses on Seven of Nine's parental instincts, maternal instincts, combined with her growing emotional maturity. That's really the main story beat here. She obviously is connected to these kids, Icheb foremost among them. She is hesitant to let him go. And that starts off right away in this teaser scene because she says that's good news, but she says it in a way that is more emotional for her than we have ever seen, where there's like a hesitance, a catch of emotion in her voice. She is clearly discomforted by the idea, and it's delivered with more nuance than anyone ever gets to deliver on this show.
This becomes a standout feature that there is a clear personal bias at play in all of Seven of Nine's official recommendations and actions she takes throughout the rest of this episode. And one of the coolest parts of the episode is when Janeway will eventually call her out on her bullshit and say, you're thinking with clouded judgment, is this you talking about Icheb? Is this you talking about your own experiences with your parents? Like, she just straight up fesses up to it and says, a little of both.
It's even more emphatic than that, because Seven, she gets, we're skipping ahead, but it is, I agree, the best scene in the whole episode, where they're having an escalating argument. Seven is challenging Janeway about this. Janeway is challenging her back, and that she's being unreasonable about the circumstances that they're finding them in. And Seven's line is that anyone who puts their own goals above the safety of their children is irresponsible. That is what she says. And then Janeway says, are you talking about Icheb's parents, or are you talking about your parents? And then she fires back, she just says both. And it's the first clear reference to what her parents did and how it endangered her, and essentially created this horror show of a life that she experienced up to the point where Voyager was able to free her that we've had in the show. Yet it feels really earned in that moment because we've had enough time and development with her that it makes sense now that she's like, yeah, I'm coming to terms with this bullshit in a way that seems right. Like, this was bullshit, and I am not okay with seeing it happen to someone else.
And it's also her admitting weakness and backing off from this I'm all science and business.
And perfect. Like, she actually admits weakness a few different times in this episode.
And embraces her humanity by saying, yes, I am being emotional and I am letting my judgment be clouded and I'm not perfect. And that's big growth out of 7 and 9. And it was good to see. So, she's obviously pretty fucked up about the concept of letting Icheb go. He is all about space and exploration, astrometrics, high technology. He's got a knack for it. It's a good fit. There's a strong synergy there. But wouldn't you know it, the planet he is from is a bunch of space farmers on a slightly more green version of Tatooine.
Yes. With a really bombed out, rotted urban area. The matte painting they actually bust out for this is really cool.
Fucking dope. And for those of us who were there for Best of Both Worlds, I can't remember what the colony name was off the top of my head, but that's exactly what you're seeing here. You're seeing a crater where a colony used to be that the Borg probably just came by, scooped up. And this is what the Borg had done to the Federation outlier colonies prior to Wolf 359.
And they take the next level with it to show what if there were some leftover people there, what if nature started to reclaim, the urban areas, and what if like these people are trying to eke out a subsistence level existence kind of under the thumb of the Borg without making themselves attractive to further interaction and assimilation, which
Now,
that tracks with kind of what we've learned about the Borg, that they're not like trying to just scoop up every single sentient. It's not worth their time. What's worth their time is technology and like critical mass of things to
grow.
assimilate.
One of my favorite things that Voyager has done in regards to the Borg, it was the revelation that the Borg are not innovators. The Borg have lost the ability to create new things. They can only steal from others and incorporate that in there.
Yes,
so
the hive mind does not have ingenuity and it does not have intuition the same way that free thinking people do, and that is why they cannot innovate. They must absorb it from others and then use that.
The episode does a great job framing Icheb's family and the colony there as like simple and rustic with this misplaced sense of pride and kind of foolish, brazen attitude that they can somehow sway the Borg in any way. And all you see is like horses and like little farm pods and trash. It looks like a flea market in Fallout, right?
Right.
But these guys, they're so proud of all their hard work. And you look at them like fools. And, they subvert expectations very well towards the end of it. But the Borg devastation is the real centerpiece there. And it looks great. That matte painting did a lot for the episode.
As we have already teased in our opener, when we meet Icheb's parents, we are greeted by two guest stars. One, I don't think is famous. The mother is played by Tracy Ellis. But the father is played by Mark Shepard, who plays Crowley on Supernatural, who was basically a main character as the show went on. Also was on Battlestar Galactica. He was the lawyer on Battlestar Galactica that was Baltar's lawyer in the trial in the fourth season.
Didn't he have a skeleton in his closet, like literally or something?
His cat was not alive that you see. Spoiler. Sorry, guys. I just spoiled a 12-year-old television show. But yeah, the cat you see in the first episode he's in is walking around is dead. The dead cat's in his bag. because he's crazy. But so
Also of note for Mark Shepard was his dad was in Voyager 2. That's a
yes,
father-son combo. His
yes,
dad, better known as a disembodied voice of power.
yeah. But if you're playing Civilization 6, he's a disembodied voice of power. If you are watching Voyager, he was the space captain Ahab.
In a pretty excellent episode. I can't remember the title of that one, but he's got like the baseball glove for a face. It's the worst prosthetic
I
they've
think
marched out in years.
it was the only episode where we've actually liked Naomi Wildman, because it was Naomi and Seven had to save the ship because they're the only ones who didn't care about getting back home.
Yeah, and also I believe Seven shoots the joint up in that one. One of her
but
many
she apologizes first. She shoots B'Elanna, but she's like, "Sorry,
sorry, it's a Tuesday. You know the rules." Pew pew pew.
I got it. There was a little scene where she had to go get her workplace shooting rifle out of her box and go down to engineering, blast the joint up.
Mm-hmm. It's on the to-do list.
So Crowley and his wife roll up, and boy, poor Mark Shepard, right? Like, he is doing that American accent that every British actor tries to do, that is trying way too hard and therefore sounds like he's half a cowboy, half having a stroke.
I didn't think it was that bad.
It wasn't so bad that it was distracting, but it was definitely something I've heard before from actors who like are trying to quote unquote sound American and struggling. But he does a great job still. Surprisingly, he's the parent who's the less evil in this case.
Who initially comes off as more evil. So suffice it to say, Icheb wants nothing to do with any of this. He doesn't remember his parents. They're strangers. Voyager's his home. That's where his opportunities are. That's where his bread's buttered. And he does not want to go be quasi-space Amish. And they kind of force it. You need to go meet him. The initial meeting doesn't go well. The parents are on a different page than he is, and Janeway goes, hey, let us bring him back up to the ship. Let's try and ease into this thing. Come on up. We'll do a dinner. And they start playing the classic tropes to bridge the gap, starting with the space cat letting Amish mom use his dumpster fires to cook a traditional Brenali meal.
In between this is where we got the initial scene where they go into the briefing room and there's the tension between Seven and them, and that's when we get the Seven Janeway confrontation we've already talked about. But that happens there. So we got that kind of clear emotional beat from Seven. She's already unwilling. She doesn't want to tell him about it. Goes to Janeway early in her quarters. This is like an episode where Janeway gets her sleep interrupted constantly. Like she keeps getting woken up by 7 of 9 having different emotional crises.
She was in the middle of reading a book with what appeared to be a rug pulled up on her and a very delicious looking platter of meat and cheese. I would not have thought that Janeway was a big meat and cheese snacker, but I'm glad to see she knows her way around a Triscuit.
But she tells him, and then we have the scene where she calls out her own parents' perfidy and their sending their child into horrific danger with them, and how much bullshit that was.
I think this is a strong episode for Janeway. She doesn't come off as dumb or foolish. Her advice
or unreasonable, like her. She's
unreasonable.
She eventually she asks enough questions where it seems respectable. Her recalcitrance to do anything rash seems reasonable, yet eventually she is convincible based on evidence that the script thankfully actually lays out in a way where you're like, you come along on the journey,
Right. Her advice to Seven in a maternal role is well placed. It's a good opportunity for her to back off some of the goofy ledges that she's been dangling off of lately. So Icheb likes the food and decides to go down and start checking the place out. His brother's like, hey, you want to play space baseball with us? And he's like, I don't remember. And they're like, oh, but you will. The father, Lucen, was that his name? Lucan?
It's Crowley. I'm not going to call him anything else.
Yeah, his father, the King of Hell, who initially seemed like the asshole, right? He's the one who's the first to like kind of get his back up when Seven starts getting a little aggressive. He's the one that like just, let us see our kids. Why are you still here?
He also drops when he gets pushed for the first time, the first hint of where we end up with this plot, which is we're not as technologically backwards as you think. We do genetic engineering of our crops that will grow in our fucking hellhole wasteland. Like, we have science to do.
Yeah, we might be doing it in what looks like a oil drill,
but we do it, which is nice because they kind of sprinkle these little hints in.
And they do it in a way where, like, who gives a fuck? Like, I want to see Icheb getting, stanky with you about that. I don't care about your fucking corn, dude. Back off.
Exactly. And it's all the more rewarding when they lay it out and you're like, oh shit.
He wasn't full of shit. The scenes you get with Icheb and his parents are pretty heartwarming, right? Like, there's a genuine connection there. I in particular like the scene where they're sitting under the skylight window and he's pointing out constellations and kind of talking about, why do your friends want to go back to Earth? And, oh, well, that's their home. And it's like, well, see, you've already completed that journey. They do a nice job warming him back up.
I like that in that scene, there's a sort of tension between the parents where Crowley is trying to, as we will see more explicitly later, kind of influence his wife's thinking about what Icheb's been through. And he actually like talks about like Voyager's got good people on it. Other people love him. And it's not just Icheb he's talking to his wife. And we'll get the context of that essentially in the climax of the episode in a way that just makes it all feel a little bit more lived in and better plotted than we typically get out of Voyager episodes, which was nice. It was good to see him put in that kind of effort to sort of weave these little threads in.
Backing up for a second here, this episode brought to you by teleplay by Raph Green, story by Paul Brown, who I'm not familiar with either of those two. And then the guy who likes Voyager so much, his name's Mike V'ger. A thoughtful direction through Child's Play Quadrant. Mike V'ger's got some chops to him, and as Joe pointed out before we started recording, we'll go heavy through the rest of 6 and 7, but it was interesting to see the real lack of normal names, the Brands, the Pillars, who's the other guy? There's good one that we like, that does his homework.
Brian Fuller?
Fullers, yes.
Yeah, Brian Fuller at this point is the script supervisor, I think. So he is influencing every script to a degree. He's not necessarily directly writing each one, but he's sort of not the head writer, but he's sort of the writer corraller. So it's hard to know exactly what episodes he's had more or less impact on unless Emery Alpha tells us. But I like to think that these moments are helped along by Mr. Fuller's expertise.
Pacing's good on this. It seems that there's a genuine conflict between Seven wanting what's best for Icheb and begrudgingly having to come to the realization that he wants to be with his family. If you didn't have the job, if you weren't looking at a clock, if you didn't read the Netflix capsule and know there was something nefarious going on, I would say by the time Voyager departs, like, it almost felt like a complete episode in and of itself, with Seven having to, make her peace with leaving Icheb behind and
complete with a goodbye episode in the transporter bay.
Yes,
like
convincing too, right?
Yeah.
When Tuvok's on his deathbed at the 12-minute mark, Tuvok's not going to fucking die, right? Stakes are so hard to establish in Voyager, but here you've got this new flimsy side character, and yeah, sure, see you later, man. They convinced me. It was a good sell.
Another good sell was the scene that Seven had with Crowley on Voyager. So Icheb's warming up to the planet. He's warming up to his parents. He wants to stay the night. So Crowley comes up to Voyager to get a portable regeneration thing for Icheb's Borg parts. and they have tension, and then Crowley tries to bridge the gap between them by essentially thanking Seven for helping take care of him. And they talk about the circumstances of Icheb's assimilation. Was that the Borg like swooped in on a new piece of technology while Icheb was like looking at it and exploring around without permission, and got taken up with everybody else that was there. It's very believable. And they kind of end the scene with Seven seeming to emotionally sort of accept that I can give him back to you. They don't have that specifically in dialogue. It's all in, she's standoffish, she's confrontational, and by the end of it, she's much more warm. She's got that kind of half smile. She makes it a joke about Icheb's willfulness, and that shows her, okay,
Passing the torch.
I get you, you get me. I can live with this. And that was another kind of brick in this little edifice we've created of Seven's character growth.
So she's tucking the kids in. They've parted ways. Yet a heartfelt goodbye. Icheb's superior intellect is going to be put to good use, helping this colony get its feet back underneath it. There's strong concern shown that the colony is in very close proximity to a trans warp node. And that's one of the real standoff points in this episode, is Seven saying, you guys are like right on top of a Borg boom tube, and you are going to get raided again. You need to maybe move. And they pull the classic Star Trek, this is our home, nothing will ever move us. And that's what she takes major offense to initially. But they go their separate ways, and the other Borg kids are very lonely and moopy, and she's tucking them into bed, and they're to plug him in the wall. The girl goes, well, what if he gets assimilated again? And that's, it's not going to happen. And then we get the breadcrumbs that something fucky is going on, because Icheb's initial assimilation point was him solo in a ship up in space, which is absolutely not what this colony seems to be about as far as space travel, and is explicitly not what the father said was the situation on this.
That leads Seven down the path of investigating if Mazati's memories are true, and starts to look into the records they got from the cube that they were on and everything else, and calls Janeway in for their second late night emotional confiding scene. And this is where Seven starts to go through the evidence to suggest, I think we've been had.
The line that's missing in this episode is Janeway being like, the last time you called me to astrometrics and rolled out your evidence, I almost shot Chakotay. I've had about enough of your conspiracy theories, Seven. I'm going to bed.
The best part of this scene we've spoiled a bit, which is that as Seven explains what she thinks is going on, which is that they seem to put him in a ship to get assimilated on purpose, and that there's something that there's some questions they need to ask of them about what's going on, is that she straight up admits, I am emotionally compromised when it comes to Icheb. I am, straight up, completely cop to it. However, that doesn't mean I don't have a point here about the facts, and that I'm going to pitch it to you. I'm going to acknowledge my bias. I'm going to acknowledge I don't want to be separated from Icheb because I like the kid.
Because we're both 20. Think about that for a minute too, like, because she's early 20s when she came on the show, and I think you were saying like Icheb was 20 something. Like, imagine that being your co-star stepmommy and being 20 with those hormones in you. Like, that guy must have steel-clad iron will to keep his eyes where he does through these scenes.
So it's funny you mentioned that. First of all, at this point, Jeri Ryan's, I think, 31, 32. It's year 2000. So she was in her 20s when she started on the show, but she's in her 30s now. Whatever. She's still beautiful. Doesn't matter. And the guy who played Icheb, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, actually, there's a clip of him when he was at a convention with other Voyager people where he literally said that. Where he said, my character was supposed to be in his teens, and there I am at 20 trying to read as a young teenager, and I'm like constantly not only in scenes with Jeri Ryan, but they shoot everything close, so I'm standing like very close to Jeri Ryan in her skin tight outfit, where I'm like using all of my brain injuries, like don't have a boner, boners are not professional. We will not have a boner today. So that struggle evidently was quite real for him.
I sympathize.
I think we all do.
Here's where the episode starts getting great, right? Like solid, it's a good Star Trek Voyager melodrama. I don't want you to leave. You're going to leave, whatever. Now we start getting into the cool sci-fi part, right? Things aren't adding up. Janeway decides she's going to turn the ship around. Meanwhile, back on Icheb's little house on the prairie, we get a real good argument between Crowley and his wife. And we're not really sure what they're arguing about at first. But Crowley's of the opinion that we already did the bad thing. This is our second chance. Let's back off the plan. We don't have to do this. He's our son. You see a lot of guilt coming through on him, and you see that he is arguably the good guy in this situation. But his wife is dead set on the fact that him coming back is a gift and a blessing, that they would be fools to squander the opportunity, that he was never meant to be, and they need to move forward with the plan. And
the exact phrase the wife uses is he says he was born for this. And yeah, the emotions really coming from Crowley in the scene of like, I don't want to lose my son again. He does not like this. He is not okay with this. But whatever it is, it's still weighing on him enough that he is not going to resist his wife's demands. Like, if she can't be convinced, he's not going to physically stop her.
Icheb comes in. They grab him, whatever crazy Borg strength 7 of 9 has. Icheb does not. They get him in a sleeper hold and then come and jab him in the neck like Seska probing around in Chakotay's for some neck juices. They're gassing him up with something. We'll later find out it's just a sedative. They knock him out and put him in a transport shuttle, and off he goes. So by the time that Voyager arrives and hails, there's some concerned looks on Icheb's parents' faces as they try and say, oh, well, he's not around. And Janeway wants to talk to him, this, that. They find out that he is not on the planet's surface and that there's a little rinky-dink transport heading out towards the Borg transwarp node, like a goat being put in front of the T-Rex paddock.
And I thought there was a really cool note there where they find the transport, and the transport is purposefully acting like it's like giving off a signal like it's going warp 9.8. Like it's
when they
really
said that too, I was
engine.
like, what the fuck? Like, that's faster than Voyager. How?
Clever.
Oh,
yeah, clever girl. Yeah.
They're spoofing the warp drive. That's neat. So the jig is up, right? And we will come to find out as Voyager speeds up and saves Icheb. We get another bright idea of transporting a photon torpedo onto another ship. It's a sphere that shows up this time, and I think that's the second time. First time a normal sphere, because that first one was in drone. That was a tactical sphere, but sphere shows up, goes to suck it in.
1 second before we go to the actual conflict with the Borg. It is in the conversation with Crowley and the wife that they're like, he's fighting for his people, and they suddenly all the pieces get put together where, Voyager's like, what the fuck are you doing sitting about on a transport that can't possibly do shit? And the pieces finally fall into place. They're like, when we found Icheb, the cube was all fucked up because of a genetically, created disease. So that's what you did the thing. You did the thing the other people we found did. You put
Space
the disease.
turns.
You put your disease in your son, and you sent them off to be assimilated to fuck with the Borg. I see what you did. Like, And suddenly all of the little mentions of their expertise in doing genetic manipulation that they set up through the episode, suddenly you're like, oh, you sons of bitches. Like it does enough where it connects to a prior episode, right? Continuity. It connects to that thing, like I told you. Like they actually follow up on that.
Big
Crazy.
deal, yeah.
And then not only that, but they just didn't hit you over the head with it during the episode. That's what they're going to do here. But they give you enough that when they finally drop the bomb there at the end, you're like, I see it and I hate it.
And it's two steps too, because if my initial thoughts were that somehow this colony had worked out a way where they were sending like tribute to the Borg, like, hey, don't raid us. Like, we made a new MP3 player. We're putting a copy of this on a ship, and like the maiden chained to the rock for King Kong to come and rip off as the sacrifice, and it was Icheb who had volunteered to do it the first time. No, you find out it's a Trojan horse, and that they're sending them up the space aids. Your first thought is, okay, well, when they knocked him out, that stuff they put in his neck, it was fresh poison. And then, yeah, you find out, no, they didn't like infect him. He was bred from the ground up, genetically engineered to naturally produce this Borg poison. So, it's almost even more nefarious, I think, in the big picture.
It pays off that great line. He was born for this. Like it just ties up perfectly when they drop that piece of knowledge. Because what, as you were about to say, the Borg sphere shows up, snatches up both Voyager and the shuttle. Voyager manages to get Icheb off the shuttle and then comes up with the plan of, why don't we just transport a little bomby boo onto the transport and then detonate it once it's inside the sphere, rather than ineffectively hitting its shields, which fortunately for our heroes works perfectly, damages the sphere enough that it doesn't want to trail after Voyager, and they bounce.
My criticism in that episode in that moment is like, oh God, how lucky for Voyager that it had come up with the idea to turn around 40 seconds before the Borg actually ended. Like, the timing's just a little too on the nose, I think, but hey,
dramatic timing
in
any kind of dramatic television, right? Like that's just always a thing, and I think that's okay.
A lot of interesting stuff happens in those snap decisions, and credit to the script for me not stopping to really question and criticize until we're going through on a nitpick. Like, in the heat of the moment, I was right there with Janeway on all of her decisions. Nothing seemed needlessly dangerous. It all seemed justified. Looking back on it, as you already pointed out, yes, this is yet another example of Janeway potentially saving the Borg from a catastrophic event. And I don't know, someone brings it up. I don't know if it's Crowley and his family. I don't know if maybe it's Tuvok. But someone out there says, like, you don't have any right to interfere with this. Like, this is beyond the scope of your authority, and you need to mind your own fucking business. And it's like, that, I mean, that seems like even beyond like Nechaev's directive of find a way to fuck the Borg up and make it happen. Like, this is some pretty cut and dry meddling that Voyager is doing in another species political action.
They offer no justification whatsoever for Voyager interfering with this, aside from, this is morally repugnant to us, and we like Icheb, so fuck you. And this is I think the episode's biggest failing, is that it's part 162 of, why does Voyager continue to just do everything in their power to not fuck the Borg up? And it's not something that needed too much extra work to make sense. It could have been that 7 of 9 does a quick analysis and shows, because they already like got a sample of the specific genetic disease that Icheb has, that they're not going to be as affected by it anymore, and they're going to continue to adapt until it's ineffective. I mean, then we're talking 2 or 3 lines of dialogue could have made for a perfect justification for why they involved themselves without it seeming unreasonable. but it if you're really gonna game the scenario out, if you're Janeway and you're actually like legit a Starfleet captain trying to do legit Starfleet captain things, and you think this kid getting assimilated might actually damage the Borg significantly, you fucking let that shit happen. Absolutely, 10 times out of 10. Same, by the way, with the space turds and Seven of Nine and Infinite Regress. Like, yeah, like I like Seven of Nine, but I really hate all the billions of people who are going to die or be assimilated because of the fucking Borg. So, yeah, fuck them.
Needs
You
of the
know,
many
sorry.
outweigh the needs of the few.
Yeah, like sorry, Seven. You're going down. You're going
I
down for
like
good reason, though.
I like to follow up kind of like closure point where you've got Icheb in astrometrics and Seven, like, it's not okay what your parents did. I like him not jumping to condemn them, and I like
Yeah.
the muddy waters of like,
He's very emotionally stable about the whole thing. He's like, oh, this was actually pretty ingenious on their part. Like, it sucks, but I get it.
being able to look at things with perfect clarity and hindsight. Like, maybe you should have just stayed with your parents and poisoned the Borg, so you don't have to be a part of Picard getting your face ripped open. Like, there were some mistakes made here. I don't want to go down the Picard rabbit hole, but these episodes, the Seven development, kind of push into this Icheb angle, like the stuff Picard does is real dirty, and that,
Yeah. Now you're starting. It's gonna get worse, by the way. Like,
of course,
there's more fantastic Seven of Nine Icheb content to come. Some of the it's just all I think in season 7, but there's a reason why Seven of Nine becomes a fan favorite character, and you're starting to see it more and more because, yeah, seasons 4 and 5, she's the sex object that Rick Berman hired, but they figure out how good she is and they start using her as a character more effectively. And uh, because of a key part of that is linked to all of this stuff with Icheb and her maturity into becoming this mother figure to him and the other kids, that when they went where they went with that Picard episode, like I said, when that Picard episode starts, you see Icheb literally being tortured to death, and you see Seven of Nine coming in with an assault rifle shooting up the joint like you do when you're Seven of Nine. You're like, damn, the stakes of this are super high. What the fuck is going to happen next? This is a big fucking deal. That's why, like, I'm like shocked that this was happening. And then the rest of that episode is just such dog shit.
was that
With
the Russian? Was that the French circus eye patch one?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
it was. It was the one where they had the
I don't want
clone of
to
Marina Sirtis in it.
veto,
Yeah.
veto, veto.
The damn like that's really what caused me to just be off that show. You know, where I just didn't want to watch it with you anymore. Where I'm like, that was disgusting. Like, I can't believe they just did Voyager and Seven of Nine and Icheb even that dirty by doing that to them. That was god awful.
So
And sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
Now I want to stop talking about Picard. Your interruption is my invitation to not talk about that show anymore. Please
I
proceed.
wanted to see a fallout in this where you see an escalation of unavoidable things that both sides have brought in. The colony using this this spoofed warp drive to bait Borg out of the transwarp node. Voyager making the active decision, we are going to sabotage this trap so that the Borg do not infect again. And now there's the Borg present. And hey, look, what's going on at this colony over here? It's been a while since we've swung through that. And Voyager having to watch as Icheb's colony gets raided by the Borg yet again. And it's just all the hands are dirty. I know that's not what we get out of Voyager, but I mean, this really seemed like the time to just highlight the fact, like, you don't play with fire because everybody gets burned.
The Borg is an elemental force is obviously the preferred method in which they should have always been dealt, right? That's our fucking beef with Voyager's use of the Borg, as they turn them into clowns. And this kind of returns us more back to the Borg are a force of nature that you avoid if at all possible. And if you can, you bat down the hatches and hope for the best, because it might just take everything out and there's nothing you can do. So for that, it definitely gets extra points from me as well. And I think your point that this might be the best episode of the season so far is worthy. We'll see if that holds up, because as I alluded to last week, we are going to get into higher quality density episodes here in the last fourth of the season. So it could be that it gets displaced, but at the moment I definitely put it in the pole position at least.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. This is A+ material for me. And all of a sudden the extra children actors laying around the place are pulling their own weight.
Especially the girl, Mazzotti. You called that out last
I like
week.
her.
I like her too. I like her more than Naomi Wildman.
I hate Naomi Wildman, so it's easy to like her, but I don't know, maybe she'll push her out an airlock or something.
What are we watching next week, though?
Season 6, episode 19 or 20? This was
20.
19.
Yeah.
I fucked up. Season 6, episode 19 or 20, Good Shepherd, and we see Seven standing there in front of someone's mugshot. In 7 of 9's assessment of ship-wide efficiency, she brings attention to 3 Black Sheep crew members who've slipped through the cracks.
This is Voyager's stab at a Lower Decks episode. Not Lower Decks, the comedy show, Lower Decks, the TNG episode. And I think that it actually is kind of cool, because it kind of tells you stories of people who wind up in Starfleet for reasons that are not the general hero Starfleet officer reasons. There's a whole plot that gets built around that, but the coolest part is that these guys that are on the ship that got stuck in the Delta Quadrant, that have no business fucking being there. And it's a unique take, and I like it.
I'm excited for it. I got some shades of conspiracy theory and 7 getting a little too nosy for other people's good, but I'm feeling what you're putting down here. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, this is a good one. I'm looking through what comes after. Live Fast and Prosper is after that, which is another favorite of mine personally. Muse? Oh, okay. Yeah, season 6 is kind of end strong here, man. It's getting very strong. Oh yeah, wow. Never mind. Fury. Whew. You got some treats in front of you, buddy.
Good, because I've had to eat a lot of poop to get here.
After all the piles and piles of shit that this series has handed you this season, it deserves to reward you.
Oceans of it.
All right. Well, thank you to our friends that have come along on this journey, including all of you from overseas. We promise to explain our regional American humor a little bit more next time around, and we'll see you next week.